What's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another YouTube live show here tonight. I am John Kurtz. Okay, I know things are a little bit weird. It's a Tuesday night, right? That's not typically a streaming night for me, but because of the holiday coming up tomorrow, I'm trying to get out of town tomorrow night and spend a little bit more time with the fam. So I decided to move this on over. I felt like that might be appropriate for everybody else too, right? Wednesday night, big night of either traveling or getting together with friends and family. I know back when I was in school, it was always the big bar night, right? Everybody wants to get out and go to the bars back home with friends and family who are back. So, hey, I figured why not do this? And we actually, I mean, it's pretty newsworthy. That's the other thing. We got a big little nugget from one Dennis Dodd that I think has left a lot of people scrambling to find out what is the motive here, how accurate is this. But Dennis Dodd has left us something to chew on about the Pac-12, a potential nightmare scenario for the Pac-12, which would be that the Pac-12 implodes because of the Big Ten, still very much out there on the table, and it all ties back to the University of California Regents and their decision looming with UCLA. So we're going to get to that. We're definitely going to cover a lot of that. This may be a little bit more realignment heavy, but we got the college football playoff rankings that came out today. TCU still hanging out there at number 4. Paul Finebaum still talking a load of crap about TCU. There are even new comments. I mean, it's like every week now they throw him up to talk about these playoff rankings. Here's something that I'm upset about right off the bat. I don't understand why it's always with Stephen A. Smith. Like, why are we having Stephen A. Smith talk about college football? We know that's not his lane. We know that's not his thing. The only thing he said in this hit that I saw was, USC is almost in there. That'd be great for college football if USC got in there. Like, okay. If that is your general opinion and tenor on college football, you do not need to be talking about anything college football related here in November. And it just accentuates ESPN caring more about the playoff than anything else and drives me mad. But of course, they had some pretty negative things to say about TCU. We have some breaking news. And that is the Kansas Jayhawks, Kansas fans. Time to celebrate. I'm sure there are a lot of bottles popping in Lawrence right about now because the news broke. Pete Thamel first reporting from ESPN that Lance Leipold has signed an extension with Kansas. There were no details other than that the extension would run through 2029. And this can all tie a little bit back to, now I know that Leipold has earned clearly a massive extension and raise based on what he's done already this year. But there was a lot of speculation about not just the Wisconsin job, but obviously the Nebraska job. We've now seen Mark Stoops get an extension, Leipold get an extension. The same day that Dennis Dodd floated Kalen DeBoer's name at Washington for the Nebraska job, he gets an extension. How many times has Nebraska been turned down at this point? And there's even a new name. Not only has Chris Kleiman kind of been the flavor of the last 48 hours within Nebraska circles, but Luke Fickell's name has now come up too, which I'm sure Cincinnati fans are thrilled of. Now, this is kind of more like the message boardy scene where Nebraska fans are grasping at straws right now and desperate for any kind of information. But of course, their search apparently continues to center around some Big 12 centric coaches. So we'll talk about that. Also, it is rivalry week in the Big 12. Well, kind of. It's rivalry week across college football. We have Big 12 football games happening. K-State, Kansas is happening, which obviously I will have something to say about that. But the other Big 12 matchups coming up this week, TCU, Iowa State. Any chance that the Clones pull off something crazy? We can break that down as well. I believe that is what I have on the outline. Oh, some new Big 12 TV numbers. That was the last thing to tease here. We got some new TV numbers from this past weekend of how TCU Baylor did. And frankly, especially when you compare it to USC UCLA, speaking of, and just how hyped that matchup was, pretty darn impressive TV numbers for the league to be throwing up there that rival what happened with last year's Big 12 championship game, which was something that we were all, I think, pretty thrilled and surprised by. That number that almost hit 5 million last year for Baylor and Oklahoma State. And obviously the stakes are pretty similar here. They honestly are. That was almost akin to what the Big 12 championship game was in a way last year with college football playoff hopes riding for one team there. So that's what I've got today. You guys know the drill. If you've been here, if you want to hop in on the show tonight, we've got 100 people in here right now. There's going to be too much going on in the chat for me to keep up with all of it. So if you want to make sure that your voice gets heard and your question or comment gets read, you can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you not only, one, get your chat in. It will pin it up at the top for me. ensures that I read it. It's also a way that you can support the channel. I cannot do all this without the support that I get from you guys, and I genuinely appreciate everybody who does contribute on that front. So that is always very helpful. Another way you can contribute is by just clicking the like button. Doesn't cost you a dime. All you have to do is go click the like button. That helps me with the YouTube algorithm and generates more views for the videos. So I always appreciate that as well. If you're watching after the fact, you can support me on Venmo. It's John-Kurtz-4 if you're not here live with a chance to donate that way. So you can do that. Also, leave a comment on the video if you're catching this after the fact, because again, much like the likes, that is a way to help me out as well. So that's it. Table is set. We'll see how this goes. I'm anticipating a bit of a lighter chat because of the holidays tonight, because it is an unusual night. So see what you guys have. You guys can dictate the conversation as we go along tonight. If not, I'll get through what I have and we'll get on our merry way to a happy Thanksgiving here on Thanksgiving week. So with that said, here is the tweet from Dennis Dodd. Now, interestingly, maybe surprisingly, maybe not, there has not really been a response from the good old Canzano and Wilner team, the Pac-12 propaganda machine out there. We have not seen a response here from this. At least I have not. But Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports tweeted, "Be careful what you wish for. It was strongly suggested to me that if UCLA is forced to stay in the Pac-12, the common sense move is that the Big Ten has to fulfill that media rights contract. It would go get the likes of Oregon and Washington, maybe more, and effectively collapse the Pac-12. So a lot of ways that you could take this and run with it. Obviously, the idea here being that because of the TV contract that has already been signed by the Big Ten, that, of course, was reported over $1 billion in value, potentially with all this, starting at upwards of $60 million per team, working its way up. That whole deal has been signed, sealed, and delivered, right? So that has been based on the premise that USC and UCLA were coming into the conference. That added a ton of value there to that deal. Now, if that's not going to happen, if the regents, which they kicked the can down the road on that meeting last week, they kicked it down the road another month. So they're still waiting until we get some finality here on whether or not UCLA will totally be able to go. All right, I see Tony's got a response for me. I'll read Tony's response here about Wilner. But the idea here being that if you're leaving a hole, a void in UCLA is not allowed to go by the regents. Which Wilner has repeatedly said is a very small chance that it happens, like 10 to 15% chance that it happens. But if they were to be stopped, you would have a sizable hole in that TV contract that needs to be fulfilled. Not just from you're losing a part of LA there, but even just from a basic inventory standpoint. You have to have the games to fulfill these contracts, and you would have one team missing from there. So the Dennis Dodd idea there would be, well, you're going to have to take somebody else, and maybe at that point it just turns into, because it's now, I don't know if this would be because nobody has the value UCLA does. I view this more like UCLA was just the preferred travel partner for USC there in this whole deal. But you would have to at least replace the inventory, and potentially here, if there's not as much value in somebody else other than UCLA, even though there are better football programs out there, maybe you just go all in and take more. Maybe this is just a threat. I mean, to be honest, I think the most logical conclusion to draw from this would be to say that this could be a threat leaked from the Big Ten, being like, hey, man, we're not trying to mess around here with this stuff from the regents. We just want this to be done. We want it to happen smoothly. Get UCLA here. And this is a warning shot saying, look, we still hold the power. And if it is just a leverage play from the Big Ten like that, then, I mean, honestly, well played, because they do have that leverage. We know that Oregon and Washington are just thirsting for an invite to the Big Ten. That's been pretty well documented. It's simply just obvious based on the current conditions and climate in college football. So if you know that they're just sitting there waiting for you at the end of the bar, if you decide to go home with them at the end of the night, all you have to do is just dangle a little bait out there and be like, look, we know we have this power. We absolutely have this power, and we can exercise it if you're going to try and mess around with this thing and jerk around UCLA going to the Big Ten when we've already signed a TV contract and a media deal and all of that. So I understand those that would simply kind of scoff at this and be like, well, just a warning shot here fired because they're getting antsy and frustrated with the regents not making a final decision here on this with UCLA and having this continue to be an issue. I saw some others. I was just going, honestly, I was reading Twitter replies to all this, which was very fascinating to see the different responses from different corners of the college football world. Um, I did see, well, Dennis Dodd's been carrying a lot of water for the Big 12. So, this is all about, he's trying to make this look fit because the Big 12 eventually wants the Pac 12 to implode and scoop up the leftovers. And I will admit, Dennis Dodd actually has been, I would say, fairly favoritive is the wrong word, but some of the stuff that he's put out there have been items that you would suspect maybe came from the Big 12 side of things, right? I guess that's probably the best way to put it. So that wouldn't totally surprise me either. But I think the more obvious and logical conclusion to jump to there would be like, well, maybe this is the Big Ten just trying to throw something, another grenade, if you will. Kliavkoff has talked about grenades being a problem here. This is just another grenade. This one coming from Dennis Dodd. Now I see Tony Altimore in here Tony says Wilner has said this since the Regents issue first came up. Though Wilner says it would be Stanford most likely. Okay. Interesting. Now that you say that, maybe I do remember seeing that at one point in time. But I do think, Tony, I would just point out that, I know you're saying Dodd is 5 months late. Now, Dennis Dodd is not like the number one college football reporter out there. I would say that it's Pete Thamel, but I would just say maybe he's not late. Maybe this is, again, a nudge from a source being like, hey, we want to put this out there. We want to stir some things up a little bit. We want to make sure everybody knows that this needs to get done and UCLA needs to come here. So it could, even if Dennis Dodd were someone aware of it, it doesn't have to mean that he's late. It could mean that this is a well-placed grenade being lobbed out there from Big Ten country. But I do appreciate the heads up on that. I definitely do. Daniel, thank you for the donation. Thank you for the support. Much appreciate that. Jason brings up something very interesting here. Jason says, and I appreciate the support, Jason, Big 12, Pac-12 info. So the Disney CEO was forced out because of extreme costs of DTC, the extreme costs of DTC costs. ESPN, Disney Plus, new CEO, cost cutting could affect any new TV contracts. Yeah, look, I'll be honest with that. And I had some people tweet that at me yesterday. I saw the news. I am kind of out over my skis on that. I do not claim to be well-versed enough to know what exactly the implications are going to be of Disney forcing out a CEO and bringing in somebody else. Bob Iger, the only reason I know the name Bob Iger, who's the guy coming in, is because I'm really not as much anymore, but I used to be a really avid Dan Le Batard show listener. And I remember Stugatz just joking about Bob Iger, like being their boss or whatever, like the head guy that would, they would just use it kind of as a meme, as a joke throughout the show. So that's the extent of my knowledge on that. I wish that I had something better to tell you. I wish I had a better little bit of insight as far as that's concerned, but I really, truly don't. So I don't know, but yes, is it something noteworthy to be on alert for? Yes, it very much is. And I will also say, have we ever seen total confirmation that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed on the TV contract? Could something change in it because of that? I don't know. I don't know the answers to all these questions. I'm in over my head on that. I'm a sports guy. I'm not really like a Disney business guy. So I will have to do a little bit more reading and research on that. But and that also feels to me more like kind of back burner, keep it on your mind. But I don't know that there's going to be anything immediate that we're going to find out that would affect the league. But it is obviously something that potentially could. And then also, yes, the Pac-12, because the Pac-12 is still trying to iron out a deal. Fox has been the network that's been said to be more likely out of the Fox and ESPN combo there on the new Pac-12 deal. That obviously I think everybody anticipates a big chunk is going to go towards streaming. So yes, things to keep in mind. And I do appreciate you bringing that up, Jason, because I totally forgot with the rash of news and notes and just interesting content that we had come out today. I had forgotten about that. Okay. So some of the pushback, I want to close the book a little bit here on this Dennis Dodd tweet that, again, he says, if UCLA is forced to stay in the Pac-12, the common sense move would be for the Big Ten to go after the likes of Oregon, Washington, maybe more, and effectively collapse the Pac-12. I did want to make this point. Some of the pushback I got was that people saying, like, look, what some guy was coming after me, like, what? Why would the Pac-12 presidents do this? They don't have the appetite right now to kill the Pac-12. This is stupid. This would never happen. I mean, this is a much different scenario than the current scenario that we live in. Yes, right now, where the Big Ten's in total power position, nobody's coming after them at all. There's no issue at all. Uh, in that scenario, they don't have an appetite to go kill the Pac-12. But if we're talking about a scenario where all of a sudden they've got a little bit of blood on their hands because they've got a TV issue, they've got a TV contract to fulfill here, now it becomes different. Like now you're poking the bear basically, and you're pushing the Big Ten to feel like they need to do something. That I think could motivate everybody. Money talks, right? I mean, that's basically what it is. Money talks. All of a sudden, they would have a money issue, not being able to fulfill this TV contract, and money talks, and that certainly changes the tenor of how all of this could go down. So, yeah, as I'm thinking through it here too, I think I remember back to Tony's point about John Wilner. I do think I remember in an article or a mailbag at one point in time, John Wilner kind of addressing this sort of scenario at one point in time. So the other part of it is like, even if it's just an even 1-for-1 swap, I was thinking about this, like if it's going to be just a 1-for-1 swap on this, like, hey, UCLA is not going to be able to go. We'll take Oregon or Washington or Stanford, whoever it's going to be. I guess really if it's Oregon or Washington that would enter the picture here, then the Pac-12 is actually losing a better football program. I don't know how all that would actually break down from a TV contract standpoint. Maybe because it's LA, you would still gain a little bit in a net swap there. But in terms of what the football programs on the field would be doing, I sure as hell would rather give up UCLA than I would Washington or Oregon. So I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. And again, very unlikely that UCLA does get held back. But I'm not sure that there's a scenario where that really actually makes sense or serves the Pac-12's best interest, which is why it's so puzzling to me that seemingly George Kliavkov has really fought this. You know, he continues to, when he does actually do a media interview, he will scream loudly into a megaphone about how UCLA is going to actually come out in the red financially out of this move by going to the Big Ten, or comparatively to what they would make in the Pac-12, that it will be a bad financial move to them, which even Wilner has outlined as pretty unlikely and somewhat ridiculous of a statement to be making. But that's what he continues to say, and he just continues to fight it with such a fervor that it makes me feel, I just don't know. It feels like you're playing with fire. It just feels like you're playing with fire if you're George Kliavkov on that front. And even if your pursuit here did actually work, what could be the alternative? The alternative could be much worse than what your current reality actually is. So curious to me. That's a curious observation here about what is going on with this. So anyway, potential nightmare scenario for the Pac-12 out there. I would guess once again that this is, a lot of times that information, particularly in like a realignment scenario, comes out, or head coach, coaching search, coaching carousel sort of stuff. There are lots of ulterior motives at play. Typically, you never really know what the motive is for somebody to put something out there. So I do think it's a fair exercise to think through what the motive actually could be here and where this would be coming from. Okay. I'm going to pair up a couple of things here. First would be TCU, number 4 in the college football playoff rankings that came out just a little while ago. There's been a lot going on. I was recording a podcast right before this after a long day of work. Like I'm scrambling to keep up with everything, but I did see TCU maintain their spot at number 4 in the college football playoff rankings. Let's see. Let me just pull these up. K-State is number 12. Texas is number 23. So I would say the Big 12 is actually continuing to get quite a bit of respect. There. You've got Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, TCU 4. Right outside, LSU at 5. They're up a spot. USC at 6. Alabama at 7. Clemson 8, Oregon 9, and Tennessee falls 5 spots all the way to 10. Penn State in there at number 11. So if you were to start, and I actually got a little bit of egg on my face on Twitter for this. If you were to start the 12-team playoff today, I was like, oh, K-State at number 12. Let's start this 12-team playoff now. Well, not so fast, my friend. Obviously, a group of 5 team is getting in there, which at this point would be Tulane, highest ranked at number 19. Of note, Cincinnati is at 24, by the way, in the college football playoff rankings to our Cincinnati friends viewing this here. Anyway, look, Ohio State, Michigan, somebody I would think falls behind TCU with a loss this week. We'll see. Um, I continue to think about this like I was listening to Finebaum and him talk down on TCU once again and talking about TCU losing to Georgia by a couple of scores. Is that going to be because we're going to elevate the Ohio State Michigan loser still above TCU in that scenario to make them? My thought is like, couldn't it be? Why are we not talking about like an Ohio State TCU 2-3 sort of a game here? If TCU wins out and then you have the Ohio State Michigan loser on the backside of this, there are a lot of scenarios that could play out, especially if Iowa were to throw a wrench in things in the Big Ten championship game, which I do doubt that actually occurs. But it is still frustrating to me, and you guys know I've talked about this same thing the last couple of weeks now, but it is still very frustrating to me that TCU is behind Michigan in these rankings. That is the one that really bothers me. Ohio State has beaten Penn State. They've beaten Notre Dame. They have an extra little carrot there to their resume to me as to what Michigan has done. If we're talking about the eye test, Michigan certainly does not pass that to me. They've got a running back, and that's about it on offense. They still have not become more dynamic at the quarterback position this year. They should have lost to Illinois this past weekend. They had a pick play on 4th and 3 there on that final field goal drive. It drives me crazy. TCU, better strength of record, better strength of schedule. A lot of things working in favor of the Frogs when you start to compare them to Michigan. And so the disrespect there does get really, really, really frustrating for me. And Paul Finebaum, if you go look at the latest clip, you can find it on my Twitter timeline at JL Kurtz. I retweeted it, but just disrespecting the Frogs once again. The beginning of the clip, I felt like he was actually almost advocating for a one-loss USC if they were to win out and beat Notre Dame and then whoever it is that they would play in the Pac-12 championship game, which is still up in the air. He was almost advocating for that USC team to be in above TCU, which obviously is pretty ridiculous. And here are a couple of quotes. One, he throws in the nice pot shot. They'll be playing a Big 12 championship game that none of us will be watching very closely. And like, okay, Finebaum, compared to the SEC championship game, will the ratings be less? Yes, but keep in mind, almost 5 million people watched the Big 12 championship game last year. Over 4 million people watched Baylor and TCU on Saturday in a regular season game. So that's a hack comment right there. That is a total hack comment. But also very elitist, up in your ivory tower as the czar of the SEC. Yes, I understand it. He actually would go on to say later in the clip, I don't mean to sound elitist. I don't want to sound elitist. And it's like, okay, you don't want to sound elitist. That's the whole vibe that you play, Paul. That's the character that you play on your show, is the elitist college football a-hole. That's who you are. And then you just let the jokers go and do your radio show for you, all the callers that take up 90% of the airtime. So you don't have to do much prep or anything of that nature to actually put on a radio show. You know what, Paul? I mean, try sitting here and talking for an hour straight. Just you, no callers, no nothing. That's what I do 2 times a week, buddy. Anyway, the other comparison that he made was he called, and this is like, it's like a double insult all across the Big 12, right? This was started by Keyshawn Johnson, who asked him a question, but they were calling TCU Cincinnati without the Cinderella story. That was the quote. Cincinnati without the Cinderella story for the Frogs, which is just very disrespectful on multiple levels. The point that they were making is like, oh, okay, so last year Cincinnati couldn't really hang with Bama in the playoff. Yes, okay, understood. What happened to Michigan? What's happened to Michigan? What's happened to Washington? What's happened to any of these teams outside of the top 5 or 6 in the college football world that continue to just play each other with the power all concentrated at the top of the sport? Like it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And I don't know, to act like it's just a put down here. TCU actually, I would argue too, is very much a Cinderella story considering where they came from last year in year 1 under Sonny Dykes. I think it's unfair to paint that as some sort of downgrade in terms of the narrative and the story value with TCU available there. I think it's dumb to play like right off Cincinnati like they were just some cutesy story last year. No, man, Paul, you love the Notre Dames of the world, right? College football royalty, you college football elitists. Where did Cincinnati win last year? They won at Notre Dame. Okay, let's not act like they were just some cutesy story here. I don't know. there's plenty of offense to go around the whole way for me on that deal. Watching Finebaum go off again, but anyway, the scenario in general here remains unchanged for TCU. They're gonna need to win the next 2 games to get into the playoff, and that's the long and short of it. That's just it. You got to win the next 2 games if you're going to be in. So nothing different there. And I don't think, regardless of what any insinuation or speculation would be there, you're not going to have to worry about some one-loss team jumping you. I don't think. Like just take care of business, win your 2 games, and TCU will be there. Also, lots of not even a mention of who TCU could potentially play in the Big 12 championship game. Instead, they have no opportunities to play another good team the rest of the year, which, as a K-State guy, obviously that rubs me the wrong way, Paul. Say it to my face, buddy. I mean, I'm just kidding on that front, but very frustrated with that. Very frustrated with that. Boom to the Sooner. Thank you for the donation. Thank you for the support, my friend. Boom to the Sooner says, if TCU were to pull it off and win the national title, what do you think that would mean for the future of the Big 12? I mean, it would help. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. That's a definite long shot because the part of the playoff here, do I think TCU could win a game in the playoff? Yes, I do feel like TCU could win a game in the playoff. If they're getting one of Ohio State or Michigan, whoever works their way up to the higher spot out of that, 100%, I think TCU could win a game in the playoff. Do I think they could win a game of that caliber back-to-back with potentially one of those teams being Georgia, LSU, whoever it's going to be from the SEC, but particularly if we're talking about Georgia here. I think that is a too tough of an ask. I do not foresee that happening. So I think the odds of that are very long. That's a part of the deal here. Now that we have this playoff, having to do it back-to-back, win twice, that does help separate the true cream of the crop. But on the other hand, I would say, I mean, it's not, Georgia just won 16-6 at Kentucky last week. It's not like they have been totally dominant week in and week out, but typically lights on, all the stakes on the line, you would anticipate Georgia being very, very good. So I don't think that is very likely to happen. If it did happen, I mean, I don't know what it means as far as like future TV contracts, which is ultimately what a lot of this is about, right? This is about money. And this is about trying to keep up with the Joneses, which would be the Big Ten and the SEC. I don't think it's really going to increase that much value to your contract right away. But in terms of like brand value, in terms of how many eyeballs would be looking at the conference differently, how many more eyeballs there would be, how much more attention there would be. Yes, I think that would create a groundswell of attention for the Big 12 that would be extremely beneficial, especially when you pair that with the marketing mind of Brett Yormark there. That would be a wonderful thing to go hand in hand right now to try and help exposure for the league. That's really a word I was looking for earlier. Exposure, exposure-wise for the league, it would be wonderful. For all of us on Twitter, I mean, my God, the field day that we would be insane if that were to actually happen. So I do think there are some really tangible benefits, but I don't think it would be drastic on its own as far as like increasing the ultimate TV value. Because while that would help, and I think that would increase respect for the conference, which means more people would watch it. They'd be a little bit more interested. I don't think it's going to create TCU into like a brand, say the likes of Michigan or Ohio State. These brands that really carry the Big Ten. The other problem is TCU is a very small private school. And the thing that you run into with the Big Ten, which has really that's what's been grinding my gears most of the week. The Big Ten has all these schools with massive fan bases, mediocre programs with massive fan bases. And that's a ton of the draw. And TCU's not going to ever be that because their enrollment is quite small. So there are a lot of limiting factors there that keep it, I think, from being some sort of like magic pill, magic bullet for the Big 12 as far as this goes. Robert, what's up, Robert? I appreciate the donation and the support, my friend. Thank you for being here. Robert says, please send good vibes to Tech to beat Oklahoma this weekend, which would mark the first time in program history Tech has defeated both OU and Texas in the same season. Wow. Okay. Didn't know that. Oh, I got the good vibes for you, Robert. I want to see you guys smoke the Sooners. Would love nothing more than to see the momentum that Brent Venables picked up last week snuffed out by Texas Tech. It's a very interesting game. Last game of the year. And I don't know. I would say feels like to me it would mean more to Texas Tech, but I guess it depends on where the Oklahoma players are actually at. I mean, I know it means more to Tech fans than it would to OU fans. Tech is a 2-point underdog here in this game. Okay, I mean, it feels like it would be a pretty even matchup there. But for Texas Tech, I mean, can you imagine the momentum that Tech would have going into the offseason if you win that game 7-5, winning conference record at 5-4? Show that you got a quarterback of the future in Baron Morton this year with the way that he played when he was healthy. Top 20 recruiting class. I mean, it would just be a terrific cherry on top there for Joey McGuire and company. And I mean, again, no reason that it can't happen. I mean, I certainly think it's very, very possible. Oklahoma is not a good team this year, and certainly very capable of being beaten by Texas Tech at home. Let's see. Now, I also have to caution myself a little bit because I got real high on the Tech train and was expecting big things in that game against Baylor, and that didn't happen at home. But I think Oklahoma is certainly an inferior team to Baylor. So we shall see. But sending all the good vibes that I've got, Robert, all the good vibes I've got. They're headed your way. Certainly wishing the Red Raiders and Cacti Nation, the Cacti Mafia, wishing you guys the best. Boom to the Sooner. Boom to the Sooner says, didn't TCU beat the same Texas that Alabama needed a miracle to beat? Indeed, my friend. Indeed. TCU absolutely put a chokehold on the same Texas that Alabama needed a miracle to beat. And I don't want to hear this argument about, okay, well, Texas only gets really fired. They get really fired up for Bama. They don't get fired up for these Big 12 games, blah, 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 blah. No, man. College game day was there. That was the game of the night. Everybody was ready for that one. The eyes of the college football world were upon TCU and Texas, and Texas knew what it meant for the Big 12 title race. There was a lot on the line there, and Texas certainly would have been focused and fired up. So I'm not buying any kind of excuse there that Alabama got them extra juiced up. Same scenario, college game day in town. There's nothing there. Nothing there that would lead me to believe that Texas should be infinitely more fired up for Bama than TCU. So I digress. Plus all the attention and the eyeballs, obviously, on TCU this season. That's going to be a motivating factor for Texas as well. So it's a fair point. Boom to the Sooner. One that I've definitely utilized before when we're having these sorts of arguments, and appreciate you bringing it up. Jason, what's up, Jason? Jason W. Thank you for the support, my friend. Jason said, Iowa State beat Iowa. Yes. What did it cost you? The Big 12. Yes. Okay. So reference, I've seen the meme out there of like Iowa State standing there, and I don't even look. I don't know what the character is from or where the meme origin is, but you can understand the context of it. Like, oh, you beat Iowa, right? Yes. What did it cost? Everything, basically. Iowa State headed for a last place finish in the Big 12 after doing that. But let me make this point, in defense of Iowa State and in defense of the conference. It speaks freaking volumes that one of the participants in the Big 10 championship game will have lost to the last place team in the Big 12. Speaks volumes about these conferences. It speaks volumes about how the Big 10 is literally just two massive brands and a bunch of overinflated, mediocre programs with huge fan bases. That is the Big 10. That's what it is. It's infuriating, especially as long as they roll with these divisions here where you're going to fart out Iowa into the conference championship game after all of this, a team that was bad enough to be capable of losing to that Iowa State team. And really, it, again, just displays the quality of depth in the conference that the Big 12 has. But you'll never hear anybody make that point outside of this show or Big 12 Twitter. You'll never hear anybody make that point or give that kind of credit to the Big 12. But it's like the Big 10 can't keep Iowa out of its conference championship game seemingly every single year. And yet, yes, they are capable of losing to the worst Iowa State team that has been put out there by Matt Campbell since his first year in Ames. So anyway. Okay. Scared Waits. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the donation. Scared Waits said, John, what happened to the old Sunflower Showdown trophy? It used to be gold. Now it's a silver cup. Where's the old one at? And I have no idea. I do not know. In fact, I'm trying to think back. I used to always see K-State's old highlight videos from like the 90s. They would have the locker room celebration video where they would have the governor handing over the Sunflower Showdown trophy. And I don't remember what it looked like back then. I'm not doubting you at all. I'm sure you're probably right, but I can't remember. I can't picture in my head what it is. I can picture what it is now because I remember the video last year K-State put out of the players, like, it's got like the cup at the top and they were acting like they were throwing stuff in there like it was a stew or a soup or something and having some fun with it. So I can remember that, but I don't I don't remember. So I wish I had a better answer for you there, but I don't. I don't. Um, I don't know. Maybe you know what? Jeff Long. I remember 2019 word leaked that Jeff Long, Kansas's then athletic director, total clown show, had wanted to like borrow the trophy before the game. To K-State's won it 13 years in a row, by the way, longest streak in the series. Wanted to like borrow it to prep for where their celebration would be if they were to win it. K-State would go on to get it, jump in front 38-3 and win the game 38-10. So I don't know. Maybe Jeff Long stole it at that point, and they had to actually replace it with a silver one. Not totally sure. Not totally sure. Speaking of that, Kansas. Let's get to that news because that is breaking news. Literally happened like right as I was finishing up my notes to hop on here on the YouTube live show. It was reported by Pete Thamel that Lance Leipold has a contract extension at Kansas. Let me pull up the tweet here. Says sources, Kansas and coach Lance Leipold have agreed to terms on a new contract, which includes an extension through the 2029 season. The new deal is structured to keep Leipold at Kansas for the long term. He goes on to say in a follow-up tweet, Leipold is a National Coach of the Year candidate after leading Kansas to bowl eligibility for the first time since 2008. The new deal, combined with $300 million in facility investments announced in October, are signs of Kansas's substantial commitment to football moving forward. Okay, so there you have it. Now, again, I will caution you, Kansas fans, you're going to have to actually produce that money. It's been announced. Kansas has done that before, announcing a big stadium thing and then not actually doing it and following through. Obviously, this is a big step, a much more important step to secure right away. But in tandem with that, I'm sure came assurances to Lance Leipold that they would get this done. I think there's still fundraising to be done at Kansas. But look, if you're talking, this is where I've got to like put my Big 12 hat on here as opposed to my my K-State fan hat. I mean, from a Big 12 standpoint, it's very good news. Lance Leipold is. I saw, shout out to my guys, the Gambling Gauchos, tweet about this saying like it's great news for the rest of the Big 12 because Leipold has drastically raised the floor of the Big 12 conference, made it a much tougher league, a much more interesting league week in and week out. Kansas has been an albatross for the league, dragging down the football for 15 years now. Obviously, Lance Leipold has been able to shore that up in pretty short order in Lawrence to get them bowl eligible this year. So for the Big 12's sake, very good thing. He's another coach. You know, anytime that you have coaches that have to deal with the rumor mill, which Leipold did because of Wisconsin and Nebraska going on at the same time, where he had connections to both. Anytime you have a coach that's being sought after by schools like that, bigger programs and these bigger conferences, you know, funny how they will crap on the Big 12 all day and then want to steal their coaches. It's a very good thing for the league. So now you're talking about, I know Matt Campbell's star is not as bright anymore, but you're talking about Campbell, Leipold, Aranda, Kleiman, Fickle coming into the league, like all these coaches that get mentioned with a bunch of different jobs, seemingly every offseason means you have some really good coaching in the conference. And you guys know, I mean, even with the K-State fan hat on, I've got plenty of respect for Leipold and the Kansas football team and the program that he is building there. You know, fan base might be a different story, but certainly at least a Twitter fan base. But, you know, for the most part there, in terms of what's happening on the field, worlds of respect. What they've done offensively, I mean, I don't know. I assume most people here have watched a decent amount of Kansas football this year, but what they've done with that offense is just incredible. They look so much better. And Jason Bean, who didn't look like he had a prayer of being any sort of Power 5 starting quarterback, played most of the year and really made a lot of plays for them. So tons of respect for him. It's very good for the conference. I mean, I honestly think even Kansas with Travis Goff as the athletic director was still in decent shape if Leipold were to have left, because I would imagine like they'd go hire like Willie Fritz, who I think is an outstanding coach at Tulane. I think they were in much better hands than, you know, handing it off to the previous athletic directors who were making those hires. Plus, Leipold had already shown like, hey, this is not like a total impossible job here. In 2 years, I got this program bowl eligible from going through arguably the worst stretch, the worst decade in FBS college football history. So I don't think it would have been a total gloom and doom situation had he left, but certainly this would be the preference. He has it up and running. I would imagine recruiting is going to take a bit of an uptick now that you actually have that, like a winning season to sell, as opposed to just loss after loss after loss after loss. And that's the one thing I would say with Leipold. It still left something to be desired. I mean, the recruiting, I think, has been worse than Les Miles when he was there, if you're going by recruiting rankings. but stands to reason that that is obviously going to improve. So, now as a K-State fan, I see people laughing. John has never seen Infinity War in game. Dude, anything like Marvel, fantasy, anything like that, don't do it at all. Not my bag at all, any way, shape, or form. You would be disappointed at my movie knowledge on every single level. We used to do a bit on my old radio show to just expose my lack of movie knowledge every single week. It was the most popular thing we did on the show. I am not a movie buff at all. Total opposite. Not really my thing. I was always watching sports as a kid instead of movies. Anything fantasy or superhero, I just could not be less interested. I could not possibly be less interested in it. So just covering those bases right there. K-State fan standpoint, yeah, it would have been hilarious if Lance Leipold left at this point in time. Even though deep down, I know I would imagine Willie Fritz would be the next hire, and I'd still be like, all right, they're in pretty decent shape. But for the Big 12's sake, that's a very good thing. And parlays onto, this Nebraska rumor mill. This is the other thing. I can always find the angle here of somebody to dig at a little bit. Nebraska, it's like, man, I think it's pretty clear that Mark Stoops would have been a target there. That was a name linked there quite a bit, a fairly logical fit from his geographic background and his makeup. Mark Stoops gets this on the verge of losing to, or on the heels rather of losing to Vandy and being 6-5. He gets this crazy extension where he's now making $8 million a year. I would imagine the Nebraska job probably played somewhat into that. So it's like, okay, did you get turned down by Mark Stoops? Now Lance Leipold. Curiously, this comes out right after we saw yesterday a lot of reports getting hot and heavy about Jim Leonard being the guy long-term at Wisconsin, which is the other job you were waiting on there. To me, it tells me Leipold probably had more interest in Wisconsin than he did Nebraska, which he should. I'm going to say that's a job I would way rather have than Nebraska. But it's also like, all right, well, he doesn't even want to wait around here to mess around with the Nebraska thing. And then even, Kalen DeBoer's name got dropped by Dennis Dodd in an article. It was yesterday or today as a name to watch out for at Nebraska. And by the way, it was an article about Matt Rule turning down Nebraska. And then Kalen DeBoer gets a contract extension today. So are we up to 4 coaches now that have turned down the Nebraska job? Maybe a 5th, if you want to say Urban Meyer, if they were taking a stab at good old Urban. So 5 coaches now turning down Nebraska. Not looking good. This thing has seemingly been a hell of a reality check for the Huskers. And that, by God, is that a fan base that needs a reality check that, in some cases probably is never going to totally get it, or at least get an appropriate reality check to where they are at. I'll just say this. I know I got asked about it on Sunday and I talked about it a little bit, but it was like a 48-hour little pop there where Chris Kleiman was the flavor of the week for Nebraska. Just all indications internally from everything, people smarter and more connected than I have heard this week. I do not anticipate any threats of Chris Kleiman leaving to go to Nebraska. You have a situation right now where the main intel gatherers in the Nebraska sphere have not been able to get much information at all out of Trev Alberts in Nebraska on this deal. It's been the pipe has been shut off there. So now this coaching search has gone on for a long time. We're getting here at the end of the year. They're getting antsy, and to me, just grasping at very flimsy bits of information. Like, oh, Chris Kleiman's upset that he had to fire his best friend, his offensive coordinator last year when he wasn't forced to. His athletic director, who seemingly would have been the guy to force him there, is the reason that everybody feels like Kleiman's not going to leave because they are that tight. Gene Taylor, who worked with them at North Dakota State. And oh, by the way, K-State has the best points per drive offense in Big 12 play this year. Are you really going to be that upset if that's the result? And for the first time, you're taking a step forward from just being 8-5, and now you have a chance to go play for a Big 12 championship. But that turns into people getting excited and like, oh, K-State's near the Big 12 championship right now. That's something I should get excited about. And then the wheels start turning. And then it's like, oh, well, both Trev Alberts and Chris Kleiman are from Iowa. Another thing that I saw. Okay, great. I don't think that is happening either. I don't know, boy, like Bronco Mendenhall. I've seen like Bronco Mendenhall as a name that has surfaced a little bit for both Colorado and Nebraska. That would be hilarious. Monken, that's another name I've seen associated with Nebraska. Also, to me, would be hilarious. Not even because I think they would be terrible at Nebraska, but because the reality check that would be for their fan base. If that's what they wind up after being first on the scene, firing Frost early, all of that, to wind up with those dudes would be very funny. Extremely funny. I will also say, just in poking around a little bit on the message board, seeing like Luke Fickell's name was getting brought up again. You know that I'm not going to treat that with any level of seriousness. Like, why Luke Fickell would go take that job, I do not think that that is any kind of realistic possibility as well. I think Cincinnati fans are probably at the same point Iowa State fans have been at, with people mentioning their coach for jobs now for years and multiple cycles. It's kind of like rolling your eyes at Nebraska after some of the suitors that have potentially been out there for their guy. All right, Browns and Beers. Browns and Beers, I'm sorry. It's been a while. You've been waiting patiently. Thank you for the donation. Thank you for the support. If you want to be like Browns and Beers and get your question or comment on the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you hop on here and get in. Tax it at the top for me and ensures that I will get to your question or comment here on the show. Browns and Beers says, sad. Basketball season peaked interest early this season in West Virginia. Good luck to your Cats against the imaginary Chalky Rock Birds this weekend. Thank you. Yes, well, Browns and Beers, I will say, Garrett Green and your Mountaineers put together a pretty nice effort on Saturday, man. I mean, that was, boy, the offense moved the ball against K-State's defense as well as anybody has in a long time. I don't know if you watched the Baylor game. Baylor couldn't do anything, didn't score a touchdown, and West Virginia just came out with a freaking blitzkrieg in the first quarter, beating, one of K-State's best cover guys, Josh Hayes, a couple of times for touchdowns. I get it. The general sphere of West Virginia athletics is in a bit of upheaval right now, and the future of the football program, a lot of upheaval right now. I certainly understand where you're at, but yeah, look, I hope, wish nothing but the best for Hugs and West Virginia basketball. Another thing I've said repeatedly on here, love that man for what he did to jumpstart the K-State basketball program and just enjoy his whole demeanor anyway, and who he is, very entertaining. So he's always in good with me. Always in good with me. And thank you. Thank you for the well wishes. My well wishes to West Virginia fans getting what you want. I hope you guys get a hire in football that you're going to be, well, an athletic director and football coach that you will be satisfied and happy with. Certainly wish you the best as far as that goes. Jumping ahead here. Apologies. We got a couple more here. Boom to the Sooner. Thank you for another donation. Boom to the Sooner. Boom to the Sooner says, if Oklahoma were to beat Texas Tech in some mid-level SEC or Big Ten bowl or a team in a bowl, finishing 8-5, how should OU fans feel going into next season? I think a lot better. I made the point earlier, like Bob Stoops had the 2014 season, right, where they went 8-5. That was Trevor Knight, I believe. So that has not been unprecedented. Like, if you find a way to pull 8-5 out of the fire, that's not been like an unprecedented low, even in this modern era, since Bob Stoops got to Oklahoma. Obviously, it would give you some real momentum. I think then you can start to sell like, hey, had to change. There's a better case for some of the narratives that I've heard coming out of Oklahoma, which would be like the defense needed this total culture shift and, build it, tear it all the way down to the studs and then build it back up. And you could sell momentum at the end of the year, especially if the defense continues to play pretty well, which, they played very well against Oklahoma State. And recruiting trail, as far as I can tell, seems to continue to be pretty good. Maybe I think another thing it could do is give you a little more momentum in terms of recruiting transfers this offseason. Still think you're going to have to find a better quarterback, possibly than Dylan Gabriel, but we'll see. So yeah, I think minor impact. I don't think it sways things a ton, because I think still on the recruiting trail, future of the program, I think Oklahoma still sells itself, even just one bad year. And typically recruiting, it lags, if you have a bad season or a great season, it typically lags a little bit in terms of when you start to really see that impact. Maybe that'll be different in the transfer portal era. Maybe that's going to be a little more instant impact, but at the high school level, typically there's a lag in terms of how fast that catches up to things. So anyway, that would be my answer to you. Boom to the Sooner. I think the other thing, it would potentially help Oklahoma fans be put at ease a little bit by just the coaching chops, the ability of Brent Venables. Maybe you can sell then, yeah, hey, a lot of adjustments. He was greener than we thought. He wasn't as ready as we thought right away, but clearly he's got the ship righted a little bit here, and we're going to be okay. So Joe, thank you for the donation. Thank you for being here, Joe. Joe says, hey, John, Jimbo Fisher may be available for Nebraska. That is indeed true. Although I don't, West Virginia fans, where are you at on this, man? I heard a rumor this was somebody saying that it came from the agent world that, well, the whole thing with Matt Rule, the hot rumor there has been, and again, I don't love dealing in rumors, so I'm very much plastering this with like, this is rumor, speculation, nothing substantial reporting wise, but that Matt Rule was not going to take Nebraska because he wanted to wait around for Texas A&M to see if that opened up, and that Jimbo Fisher was being linked to West Virginia, which, there's an obvious connection there too. And my thought was, God, I don't know. West Virginia, man. Jimbo Fisher's a name. He has won a national championship. But you're seeing how that's going at A&M, and you're seeing how that's going with the greatest recruiting class that we've seen last year that they pulled in. They are certainly not lacking in talent. And he's supposed to be an offensive guy. And the thing that is the major problem in College Station is the offense being dreadful and not being able to find a quarterback. It feels to me, I'm of the mind that like Jimbo seems like the game has passed him by a little bit. Used to be this offensive wonderkin kind of guy. Just feels like they're stuck in the mud right now. Now, maybe some of that's based on A&M. Maybe a change of scenery would do them good there. But I would be very leery of that if I were a West Virginia fan thinking about that. Like, as leery as you possibly could be with a national championship winning coach. But yes, I'm here for the jokes. And it does seem like at this point, would that not be like the most perfect pairing, Nebraska and Jimbo Fisher, based on, what the fan base thinks of themselves and what they actually are. I guess Jimbo's not a fan base, but I think you get the idea there. I'm running on fumes a little bit right now. So if I'm not at my sharpest today, I do apologize. I feel like I'm not at my sharpest with all that. Jason, what's up, Jason? Jason says, is Neil Brown's buyout too high to fire? West Virginia fans remind me of what the buyout is for Neil Brown. I know it is high. I don't know. I guess some of that maybe I don't know West Virginia's financial situation well enough, Jason, to give you a good answer. Honestly, I see Kuz is in here from Kuz's Corner. He could probably give you a better answer to that than I could, because I know he's connected there and follows West Virginia in and out. Okay, around $17 million for the buyout on Neil Brown. That is a lot. That is a lot. It's not as bad as it could be. For instance, Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. But I don't know, man. I don't know how. I know how West Virginia fans feel. I interact with enough of you guys here at this point in time. I know how you guys feel about it. Seems like that would be a pretty untenable situation to bring him back. Seems like the fans are pretty checked out at this point in time. So it feels like you got to make it happen somehow. But I don't know what the coffers are like there in Morgantown. I honestly do not. So I would kind of defer to Kuz's Corner, Browns and Beers, some of the other West Virginia folks that we have in here as far as that goes. Eric. What's up, Eric? Thanks for the donation. Eric says, I still can't believe I went to Norman only to witness the worst quarter in Oklahoma State history. What happened to my team this year? Oh, boy, Eric, I empathize with you on that front. I have been in Allen Fieldhouse to watch K-State get drilled multiple times. It is not fun. Now, granted, a lot of those times were as a media member, but I did it once as a fan. I did it once against my better judgment as a fan. 2009, and watched K-State get blown out. I mean, they were fairly competitive after a while, but they got crushed at the beginning of the game, and it was never really ultimately all that competitive. So I feel for you, man. That's tough. I think what happened to your team this year is just that bad year with injury luck. I mean, Oklahoma State has just been so damn beat up the entire year, and obviously a lot of that at quarterback with Spencer Sanders. To me, from the outside looking in, that would be the significant part of it for me, like what happened to Oklahoma State. Plus, lost a lot from last year, man. Jim Knowles is a great defensive coordinator. I still have a lot of respect for Derek Mason, but had things really rolling last year. Personnel losses, coaching losses, just a lot. There was a lot to absorb in 1 year, I think, for Oklahoma State when you throw the injuries on top. And, hey, there's a good chance here. I mean, if you take care of business against West Virginia, good chance here you're still finishing 8-4 this year. So I know Oklahoma State fan expectations are high, but like it's not like this has been, I feel like I'm Mike Gundy. I'm kind of parroting Mike Gundy at one of his press conferences. It was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, his midweek press conference or beginning of the week presser. He was just like, look, man, like, people act like the sky is falling and everything's crazy. Like we're not, it's not like a 2-10 team. So I would reinforce that to you too. I think the program's still in perfectly fine shape as far as all that goes. Rick, what are my thoughts on Gonzaga joining the Big 12? We've discussed it in a couple of videos. I would encourage you to go back. It was the main subject of a video a couple of weeks ago when this first broke. And I know there's since been a tweet saying that like some of that momentum may be building a little bit more. There is a risk, but I'm open to it because I think trying to nail yourself down as like the best, bar none, hands down, far and away basketball conference, you can recoup some value there if you're not able to add major brands on the football front right now. You could add what is currently a major brand in basketball doing that. You're doing it with a risk, the risk being what happens post Mark Few at Gonzaga. And I certainly understand the concerns people have about that. So a gamble, but one that I think you have to at least be open to exploring because we've kind of opened this door to like, hey, the Big 12 is going to need to be really creative in what it is that they do moving forward as a conference to try and generate value, however it is that they can. Okay, I think the last thing, so this is like a 5-minute warning here before I hop off. If you have anything to get in, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you get in and interact tonight. If you want to get something in the next 5 minutes, we got the TV numbers for the week and 4.4 million for Baylor TCU, man. It was a great number. That was the sixth highest watch game of Saturday. Ohio State, Maryland was number one at 6.6. Illinois, Michigan at 5.5, which, it's just like the amount of people that watch crappy Big Ten games. What was that? 19-17. Tennessee, South Carolina had 4.9. USC, UCLA had 4.52. Georgia, Kentucky had 4.48. And then you have TCU, Baylor coming in at 4.4. So USC, UCLA, 4.52. And we know how much hype there was about that game. This is the most hyped up USC, UCLA game that I can certainly remember. Two great teams, two great quarterbacks, storylines galore, Heisman Trophy implications, playoff implications, all sorts of things that play there. And TCU Baylor does 4-4, two small private schools in Texas versus the two big boys in LA that are moving to the Big Ten. And that's the difference in TV ratings, which again, to me, underscores it's about not only being entertaining, but it's also about the implications there. People feel like there are playoff implications, they will watch. And with an expanded playoff, maybe it's not going to be quite as heightened because more teams will be getting in. But I also think in general, that will create more interest in those games. People will be a little bit more interested in more of the stakes in games like that, games of that ilk. Proved it last year in the Big 12 championship game, which was 4.83 million for Baylor and Oklahoma State. There were clear playoff implications. People wanted to watch the game. Here, clear playoff implications for TCU playing at Baylor, and it turns in a really, really big number. So I think that's very, very good news for the Big 12 that they continue to perform like that and to perform as closely. I mean, I'll be honest, I was very surprised. I would have thought that USC, UCLA would have cleared TCU, Baylor by 1 million probably in viewership, but that was not the case at all. By the way, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma did 3 million. Then you have Utah, Oregon at 2.54 and Iowa, Minnesota at 2.5. I mean, that's the thing. 2.5 million people watching Iowa and Minnesota. Good Lord. I mean, I would rather stab my eyeballs out. Literally would rather take a pen and stab it in my eyeball right now than watch Iowa, Minnesota. I did actually try for like a brief minute. It was like a transitionary period between games or something. I tried to throw on Iowa, Minnesota for a minute. And I was like, yeah, I just can't. Couldn't do it. Could not do it at all. Watching that football. Could not. James, what's up, James? James says, happy Thanksgiving. Go Cougs. Finally, a game where they played defense. Yes, congratulations, James. The Cougs still alive here. Still alive for a conference championship, technically, right? I believe that is the case. Going to look up here and see what, because my apologies that I don't have it handy and ready to go here, what Houston's doing this week. Houston is hosting Tulsa. That's right, hosting Tulsa. I do remember looking that up right now. Healthy favorites in that game. beat East Carolina 42-3. Man, yeah, the defense did absolutely show up for Houston there. Dana Holgorsen pulling this season perhaps out of the fire. It all started with that onside kick against Memphis. All started with the good old onside against Memphis. So, yes, James, congratulations. Happy Thanksgiving to you too. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody here on the channel. Thank you for bearing with me tonight, squeezing in a live chat on an off night typically, and helping me with my holiday plans tomorrow. I'll be able to get out and go see some of my extended family a little bit earlier because of that. So certainly happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. Hope you guys have a great day. Really what I should be saying is a very happy Egg Bowl to you and yours, because of course the most important thing that will happen on Thursday will be watching the Egg Bowl with Lane Kiffin coming off of his Twitter antics. If you missed any of that, would highly recommend going and checking all of that out. But Kiffin, Mike Leach, Egg Bowl, Kiffin and the Auburn job, so much there at play for college football fans. That should be glorious, glorious, glorious. All right. Hit me up on Twitter at JL Kurtz. I'm pretty responsive in the DMs if you have anything for me there. Spread the word about the channel, social media, word of mouth, whatever it might be. Anything you can do helps. Go tell a friend that's a college football fan, a Big 12 fan, a fan of one of the schools in here about this channel, conference realignment fan, whatever it may be. Let them know about this. Spread the word on social media. Fan groups that you have on social media, great places to get the word out about the channel as well. Continue to grow this thing and enjoy your holidays. I will talk to you guys on Sunday. Hopefully with my Cats headed to the Big 12 championship game, but we'll see. I'm nervous. A lot on the line. Send me some good vibes, folks. Take care.